This government meeting is brought to you by Eastworks and our local cable subscribers.
I'll open up the meeting for February 12th. Rules and Government Relations Committee of the City Council will be Easthampton. I see all councilors are present on the committee. I see no one else in the room. We do have on the agenda up to 10 minutes of total public speak time. Here's a door opening, but it's not anyone else to come in here. So, we can proceed. We have minutes from two dates. We have minutes from the 29th, I believe, of January. And I would entertain a motion if everyone's had a chance to review those minutes. So on the 29th. Second. Motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Motion passes 3-0. We have an approved minutes. We have one other set of minutes that we're going to review.
Yes.
And that was, I believe, from December. In December.
Yes, the last meeting in December.
Yep.
I'll review those and resubmit them.
Sure. We have one item on today's agenda after public speak. I don't see anyone in the public here. We do have some over there. Good, good.
How are you?
How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
We've begun the meeting. It's a public speak. So now that we have one member of the public in public speak, but we have no public.
Okay.
No public comments.
So mostly,
just public comments regarding the item on the agenda.
so
You have on the agenda the open meeting law complaint.
Okay.
That was filed.
So when that
would be discussed, we'll bring it up.
okay, so when that agenda item comes up, will I have the ability to?
You will have the ability to tell us what your thoughts are.
Okay, okay. I'm mostly here to listen and answer any questions or clarify any points that you all might have. So,
Great.
and I'll speak as much as you'd like, or not. So,
Okay, that's great. We did receive the complaint and it was received on 1/27. We have through, if you count the business days, I count through this Friday, the 14th, for 14 business days to respond. Matter was referred to us from the council.
I believe that's correct.
So that would be, the council would either have to write and request an extension for that matter until we could meet again as a full public body, or we could proceed to try to answer the question from there. Here, we're trying to understand for sure whether we understand the complaint. And we have the complainant here, so I thank you so much for coming and being able to share with us. In reading over the complaint, I see that the violation is of the open meeting law, section 29.5, which I believe refers to the CMR, the Code of Municipal Regulations of 2905, within the Attorney General's open meeting law division. I believe that section refers to, let me read the definition. It discusses the process by which complaints can be made.
It does.
And says that the 2905. All complaints shall be in writing using a form approved by the attorney. A public body need not, and the Attorney General will not investigate or address anonymous complaints. That is referring to how the Attorney General's office will respond to anonymous complaints. A public body need not address the complaint that is not signed by a complainant with regard to the process of the open meeting law. A public body need address not the complaint that is not filed using the Attorney General's complaint form. We have the Attorney General's complaint form on the violation. I'm, for one, struggling to see what law was violated in the open meeting law process. And I'm glad that you have a complainant here, because I'd like to ask that person what the issue is. Are there any other comments by the fellow councilors before we quiet?
Same from me. I just want a clarification and then to hear from Mr. Poole.
Yeah, my understanding upon reading through 2905 as well as the complaint made was the language, I believe, hinges on need not versus will not. And so my understanding and interpretation as a public body, we may consider anonymous complaints when making decisions, as long as those decisions and complaints are addressed within the structure of an open meeting. And the issue would be, in my understanding and interpretation, if the two counselors in question had discussed the nature of the anonymous complaints outside of an open meeting, that would be in violation of open meeting law. But because it was within an open meeting, it did not violate by the nature of it being an anonymous complaint brought up. So that was my understanding, but I'd love to hear more as well. So.
Yeah, in reading this,
And I do want to note that I do think there are legitimate concerns around transparency that this complaint does bring up for us to discuss, but I don't believe that the issue in and of itself is a violation of open meeting. So.
right.
So essentially,
If you could identify yourself.
Yes.
And your address
yes,
for the public.
yes, of course. My name is Eric Poulin and I live on Parsons Street. Councillor Riley's conduct around this appointment, this reappointment, I felt was in violation of three potential areas that I felt that I could pursue. I felt that by reaching out to all appointees and asking to meet with them, and when concerns were raised about me, he made no effort to reach out to the park commission, the park director, or myself to respond to these. I feel is a concern that could have been brought to the State Ethics Commission. I feel that the comments that were made about me were discriminatory based on body size and the fact that I have documented hearing loss. So I sometimes do speak in an elevated voice. I feel like the State Commission Against Disability could have been brought into this. My intent is not to do damage to Commissioner Riley's career or reputation or anything like that. I wouldn't stoop to that level. I went for what I felt was the lowest hanging fruit and the one that would be potentially the least damaging to him, and decided to file an open meetings law complaint based on my interpretation of 2905, which I have had attorneys also read, and they share my interpretation of it as well. I am no attorney myself, but I have had some legal guidance on this. And as you see from the complaint, what I'm asking for, I'm not asking for his resignation. I'm not asking for his censure. I'm essentially just asking for him to apologize in the same format in a city council meeting where he brought up that essentially my body size and my tone of voice creates a hostile environment. I'm not asking for the names of the anonymous complaints if they actually do indeed exist. I'm not asking for those people to be named. I would never do that. my deepest concern was that, again, Councilor Riley was able to weaponize his position of power as chair of the appointments committee to frankly slander and disparage a member of the community who simply was in hopes of serving his community on another term on the Parks and Rec Commission. I will reiterate, as I stated in the public speak at the city council meeting in January, I don't know Councilor Riley. He and I have never met. I don't know what his intention was with this. I can tell you that I did submit a public records request, and it is clear that Councilor Riley treated me much differently than he did any other appointee. And it's documented that he, in his words, he opened an investigation on me in November. Again, it's really disappointing that an elected official, someone that the people of Easthampton have put their trust in, would use that position of power rather than, and Councilor Kwasinski, I know from following city council for many years, I know that you have more of a, hey, let's sit down and talk about this mentality rather than let's throw a grenade at someone. So I was really flabbergasted the way all of that went down. I was in the Zoom meeting the night that Councilor Riley brought up the charges against me. I was not called upon. I never had a chance to speak on my behalf. The director of the park department wrote a letter on my behalf in favor of my reappointment, stating that I've never caused any trouble whatsoever during my time on the commission, and I'm just frankly really confused and really feeling really out of touch with how the city council appointments committee goes about its business. And this is not something that is new. It has happened multiple times over the years where people basically their lives and their reputations are litigated in public in front of the entire town for simply wanting to serve their community. I think it's not fair. I'm sure you can hear the tone of my voice. I'm still hurt by it. I'm still upset by it. It's caused great emotional stress. It's caused great emotional trauma. And I simply want an apology. I don't want to drag Councilor Riley through the mud. He did a good enough job of doing that to me, so I would never do that to him. I simply would like a sincere apology. And when Councilor Smith apologized for her role in the appointment, I attended the last city council meeting, as you were aware. I thanked her. I essentially forgave her, looked to move past, looked to move forward. And Councilor Riley had given no such apologies at the previous meeting. So that's what I'm looking for. Sorry, quite a lot. I said I was going to listen, but I didn't have a prepared statement, but here we are.
We appreciate you being here and sharing with us your feelings and comments, thoughts about the subject. We also appreciate your service on the park and recreation.
I grew up there. It's a place I love.
So I think as a community, we all want the same thing. I think we want to have good people feel comfortable coming to meetings, being part of the process, and have a way to have an appointment process that's fair to everybody and open, and yet I would hope that no one would disparage others, but that's kind of the business we're in, is disparaging. I mean, people can say whatever they want, however they want. To have a good process, however, is a different thing.
People can say whatever they want.
Yeah.
However, the expectation is if it's coming from a person in power, that there would be actual evidence to back it up. Councilor Riley had no evidence other than what amounts to hearsay.
I was speaking more in general terms for the general public and not specifically to this specific, when I'm in my last comment.
Understood, yes.
It's like, that's what I think we all want. How do we get there? How do we establish good procedures? How can we go through the process and work with people? I'm not sure that the open meeting, as you said, there's lots of different ways to go about the process. And I hope that this group here can help you to find what you're looking for in the process. Okay, that's my personal opinion, and as a member of the Rules and Government Relations Committee.
I can, if I
It's hard enough what we do and what we all kind of work toward.
Sure.
I'll give you the floor.
If I may just interject for one moment. So in addition to that, I mean, I believe if you look at the rules of the city council under Rule 19, there's specific language about disparaging or using threatening or inappropriate language. And I feel that what the appointments committee at that time in the December meeting stated about me falls under that.
Can I ask a question?
You may.
Just for clarity, you still have to this day not met and had a discussion with Councilor Riley?
Nope.
Thank you.
Sure. You know what, I want to be
We
very,
can look into that, into the Rule 19. Certainly, we'd like to have good procedures and good counsel process.
I want to be very clear that also in my profession, in my line of work, I have spent my entire career trying to create safe learning spaces for my students, many of whom come from underprivileged backgrounds or are from marginalized groups. And having an elected official so casually state that I create a culture of hostility is just, those are words that are so damaging. And I have spent my entire life and career not doing that. And I feel all of the evidence of anyone who actually knows me and has worked with me will tell you that the words that were said about me are about as far from the truth as possibly can be. I'm well known throughout the state. I was president of the Massachusetts Library Association. I was president of the Western Mass Library Advocates. I am one of the leaders in our profession. You can ask anyone who's on the library board in town, because I serve on that board as well. And I'm in librarianship. Being a collaborator and being someone who shows mutual respect is something that is essential. I couldn't do my job if that were not the case. So to hear those words being used so casually about me, that could do irreparable damage to my livelihood, my career, my ability to earn a living. It's not, so this isn't just, and please, I'm not trying to do, this isn't a gotcha situation from my perspective. I would just like a bit of reconciliation and some recognition that what happened at that December meeting was not okay.
Thank you. Is there anything else?
I'll answer any questions, but I think right at this point.
I think you've stated your situation well and your feelings well, and I appreciate the manner in which you have described your situation and your feelings. I think you're handling yourself in a very appropriate fashion, and that's honorable, and I appreciate that very much from my perspective.
Nice.
Do we have any questions at this point?
it's more of a statement, I guess, rather than a question, if that's okay.
Sure.
I just want to thank you again for coming the multiple times you've come and tonight as well. I appreciate the obvious impact this has had on you. And as someone who gets into discussions that are very complicated in my day job, I understand that there's a lot to hold in terms of emotion and impact and what this is going to do in terms of how you're perceived, both by yourself and your peers and your community. And I think that what makes this a little extra complicated is the channel in which we're considering this particular request from you, because I think, to your point, there's obviously been damage done, and we are in some senses restricted by the request to consider the channel that has been brought forward. So what I would like to say, just in terms of a statement, is I do think that there can be multiple truths at the same time. I think that there can be a truth that there was harm done, and there can be a truth that there may or may not have been a violation that occurred. So I just wanted to put that out there. If we do end up deciding one way or another, it doesn't necessarily mean it's a reflection on you personally, but it's just sort of the structures with which we're working through. But again, thank you for bringing us to us.
I just want to
Yes,
make a quick
Councilor
statement.
Terrell, please.
I wanted to thank you again for coming tonight, and apologize from me for you having to go through this situation. It wouldn't be pleasant for anybody to go through. As somebody who served on the Park and Rec Commission with you for over 2 years, I have had nothing but positive experiences with you in every way, shape, or form. I spoke up in support of your reappointment that evening, and I still feel that way. But I want to thank you for coming and explaining yourself and just really putting it out there and bringing this to our attention.
That being said, we're dealing with an open meeting law within the confines of an open meeting law, and there may be other ways to resolve the issue
Yeah, I mean,
that don't have specifically with regard to the open meeting law. And I think that may be the appropriate way to pursue this matter. Since I don't see an open meeting law violation as I read the open meeting law, with regard to the section that's been cited. And that's why I was struggling with, is there another section of the open meeting law that we should be considering or could consider this matter?
I read through the whole thing earlier today to refresh my memory, and it does not cover this specific type of situation with regards to taking anonymous information
And making an
and making
appointment.
it as part of the discussion. As long as it's part of an open meeting, then we are allowed to consider anonymous submitted information. But the only language I found was that we are not required to investigate or address anonymous complaints, but as such, anonymous complaints may not be able to be fully considered in a decision-making process. So
Where do you read that?
that's just in general. I'll have to look up the exact section, but the
Again, I think this is written to describe the open meeting law complaints.
complaint, exactly.
And this is this form here that they're talking about. They're not talking about the appointment
Right, and that's
process
the only,
or another section that says, oh, well, in general, that really is a rule of either the city charter or the rules of the city council or the appointments committee.
Mhm.
And we don't have any of those.
Yeah, I mean-
But here we have a process where the attorney general says all complaints shall be in writing. This is the complaint.
right, and
Yeah,
and that's I think the
And that's where I
limitation that
think
we have.
we're limited as to what
Yeah.
relief we can grant through this.
Right.
And that's why, again, I asked, is there another section of this that we can consider? Councilor Terrell, any thoughts?
I don't.
You're not required to have any.
No, I don't. I would just
Just wanna
echo what
be
Councilor
free.
Jasdik said regarding the specificity that was in the verbiage.
Right. So then the question becomes, is this an open meeting law violation? or is it not? And if it's not, then we would notify the Attorney General that we don't think that there was an open meeting law violation. This is what happened. And
So-
a letter would go to the Attorney General's office, and then they would decide on their level whether their language on complaints had to do with the filing of the complaint form, or more generally, all complaints within the city of the, and I don't think they were there to talk about all complaints of the city.
No, I mean, my understanding, again, I think if we go back to what is the purpose of open meeting law in and of itself, it's to make sure that there's transparency in decision-making processes. So as someone who was not involved in this particular situation until after the fact, my understanding is that there was transparency in terms of the decisions made, whether or not to vote in favor of the complainant's reappointment, but it included anonymous information that was relayed by Councilor Riley.
That's correct.
That to me, I think, as Eric mentioned, may fall under our own personal rules in terms of our code of ethics. But as the matter before us, I do not believe it violates open meeting law unless we were to have had someone say that Councilor Riley discussed the contents of those emails with other members of the council outside of the city council meeting or outside of the appointments meeting, which I don't believe is the case.
I don't believe it's right. I know I was actually taken aback by what was being presented at the meeting. And that's why I asked for further clarification, if you recall. Because I did not know that this was going to happen. So I had not been contacted in this matter. And I didn't feel that it was appropriate at the time. I'll explain my vote of what I did. I abstained from the matter because I didn't think it was appropriate without further information than what was provided in the open session. How can you vote yay or nay? I abstained. Especially being very appreciative of the service that Mr. Poulin had given to the city during the time as Park and Recreation Commissioner. And that meant that in the end, Mr. Poulin was not denied the position, but was reappointed after another little snafu. But he is now a member of the commission and going to 6 o'clock meeting shortly, I presume. Is there something else, some other section of this that you care to refer to?
Well, I guess my question then is just one of clarification. So what would then be an appropriate mechanism to have for a citizen to have this conversation? So essentially what in filing this complaint was in hopes that I would have a day in court that I was never granted by the appointments committee. What then is in this, you know, I'm not Mike Tausnick. I don't have the city charter memorized. God bless him.
I'm not sure anyone else does.
It's amazing. So is there some kind of way? So if frankly, if further investigation hadn't happened, as far as the vote count total goes, or if I hadn't filed the open meeting law, the public records request, my apologies, I would have never had the opportunity to, as far as I know, I would have never had the opportunity to speak to this. I'd be off the commission incorrectly because of the vote count, which that's a side issue. I don't want to get into the weeds on that. So I guess that's just my question, that, is there, other than me going to public speak at the council and, stating my perspective there, is there any means for this to happen?
You bring up a good point. Should there be a means? I think there should be some means. I'm not coming to mind with anything quick and simple, except maybe an informal sit down with the parties. And that may be the most appropriate way of handling this if one can be arranged. If you're up to it.
Because what I've heard is you said that, I mean, I know you just said your day in court, and I know you're just speaking off behalf, but I also heard you want an apology, which I think is a fair request. And I also think your point is well taken, that there may not necessarily be a formal process other than coming to open speak or public speak during different meetings. So I think there's a couple different things. So I think first, we can certainly review further in-depth our rules and see, does it make sense for us to put in place any kind of suggestions or mechanisms for this kind of situation in the future. But for your particular case, I would say at this point, my understanding is it's really up to the individuals involved, yourself and Councilor Riley, namely. So we could reach out to Councilor Riley and ask if he's open to a conversation or a mediated conversation, if you are as well, and see what happens from there. But my understanding is that would be the main step to take as far as that goes. But if either of you know or think differently.
Well, my understanding was just that Mr. Poulin would want more of a what I'm understanding from you is something similar to what Councilor Smith did, just something, because the initial statement by Councilor Riley was made in public. So I understand that Mr. Poulin also wants the apology to be public also, probably at a city council meeting. So not that I'm against a potential sit-down. I think that would be great, but I think the end result here, and my interpretation, and then correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the whole purpose of this was so Mr. Poulin, like you said, it's not a gotcha moment. He wants an apology.
Public apology, got it.
He's not looking to, like he said in the statement, get anybody fired or censured or whatever. Just wants a simple apology.
We're not a court of law, or a city council with dealing with the specific issue of open meeting law. Since that's what was before us, we can move on that. We can respond to the Attorney General. I think we're also free to have conversations. I, for one, will be talking to Councilor Ryan. We'll reach out to Councilor Ryan and have a conversation. I think that would make sense if it so happens that we needed to get together. I take it you're amenable to that. Should that occur, I could call you up and you could decide at that time if you like to.
Yeah, I'd rather not make a.
You don't want to make a public statement about, sure. But I think if it were to be, as Councilor Terrell had said, an apology, that's what I think would suffice. Let's see where that takes us. In the meantime, if that's okay. Yeah.
That is okay. Councilor Terrell is correct in his statement of, like, I'm really not asking for much. I am literally asking for a public apology. And I to be honest, the level of trauma that all of this has incurred makes me hesitant to want to meet with Councilor Riley. So I'm not saying that I'm not closing the door to that, but I want to be upfront and state that.
Let me interject and say I appreciate you sharing your feelings on that. You're doing so in a very healthy way. It's always great, I think, for people to put their feelings out there, and I think you explained yourself very clearly as to how you feel about this. We will do our best to respect that. On another matter, I intend to do some looking over on our rule for appointments, and it may be appropriate to have a discussion on within the appointments definition about whether or not anonymous complaints or unsigned complaints or non-public complaints, I'm not sure quite how to word it, should be considered. And that's something that I think some good that could come out of this is that we have a discussion about it. Now, as Councilor Riley had said at the meeting, there are reasons that he felt it was important to have protections for certain types of information, and there may very well be. That may be beyond the scope of an appointment, however, the protections. I'm thinking of battered people. If a person is battered, they might not want to have a complaint be public, or they were the victims of abuse. You might not want a complaint to be public. I'm talking about physical police matters, really. But that's a police matter. And that's where I think we would direct people to go say, deal with the police, deal with the district attorney. And that's really where you should go. If it's a matter for appointments, then a healthy debate or a healthy discussion on a subject, I think, requires people to state who they are and their position on a subject and what they have to say, so that everyone is aware of, we're not talking about threats to physical harm, danger, and fear of retribution we're talking about appointment to a committee. Anyway, that's a separate matter that I think we ought to consider putting something on the table for the discussion, and then discuss that at that time. The merits of whether or not we should have considering anonymous complaint. That's separate. I'll indulge one more time.
Sorry. Yeah. And I would like to be clear with my perspective that obviously I agree with you, Councilor Krasinski, of the sensitivity of protecting people's identities, particularly if they've experienced trauma. I completely, I'm not advocating for that. However, the way that the language was used in that appointments meeting insinuated that I was an abuser.
And that's where,
and that is something that is
that certainly, I did not pick that up in the meaning of the discussion.
I mean, the words were that I create a culture of hostility.
If I were the victim, I'm the one being talked about, I might feel very differently about the subject. So that being said, our job is to be sure that those rights are protected for everybody.
Correct. Thank you. Yeah, that's ultimately my hope, is that me as a potential appointee
and I was
will
speaking,
not be disparaged as.
And I was speaking more generally in terms of future appointments. That was the realm I was talking about, because we can do nothing about past appointments, but we can set good policies for the future.
Yeah, and I think again, that goes into our rules more than the Massachusetts level rules, because the Attorney General's Division of Open Government stated that they cannot ensure that statements made in public meetings are factually true, which includes disparagement, slander, defamation, harassment. Now, we can ourselves review how to handle that, but from, again, the complaint, it's not about that. It's more about, was it discussed in public? But to your point, I think there's a couple different themes coming up, and that's one of them, which I think will be a good future discussion for us. So.
I assume you have to vote, and I assume that I should not be in the room for that, or?
You're welcome to be in the room for the entire process.
Okay.
Public meeting.
This is a public meeting.
It's true.
No violation of open meeting law.
Watch us violate while we're trying to determine.
We're trying to.
Well, in actuality, as mentioned, I do have Park and Rec Commission in a few minutes, so I'm going to go prepare for that. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for coming and speaking forthright. Honestly,
Thank you. Thank you.
I appreciate that. Yes,
I don't think how it's written, there was an open meeting law violation.
you could say this a little louder.
Well, no, I'm trying to think as I copy it. So no, I don't think that as it's written, there was an open meeting law violation. I also don't think this should be dropped. I do think we should pursue, because I don't know why the process failed Eric the way it did, but I do think it failed him. And I don't think he's asking for a lot. I don't know how we would, I don't know how we would progress on that issue. But I don't think it should be dropped just because if there doesn't end up being an open meeting rules violation, I don't think it should be dropped at that point because obviously that's not going to remedy it for Mr. Poole.
Right. What I hear you saying is that you don't see that 2905 was violated, that it wasn't a violation in regard to that, that there wasn't.
I don't. I think this was just filed to get our attention because he wants an apology.
I agree.
I'm gonna call how I see it. That's the way
Yeah.
that, you know, he's somebody who was born and raised in this town. He bleeds Easthampton, and this crushed him. It's absolutely crushed him.
Yeah.
To have to go through this, and you know, like I said, I don't know where the ball was dropped or what happened, but something happened. And considering the result, I don't think it's a lot to ask for to ask for an apology. Although that's in Counselor Riley's lap as far as that's concerned. And like I said, I'm not sure how we progress, or if we progress as a committee towards that. You know, is that? I mean, you have a discussion with him, or we have a discussion with him, or I don't know, but I don't think anything was violated for open meeting law violation.
Yeah, I don't think, what I'm hearing from Counselor Jadzik is that
Yeah,
you didn't see an open meeting law violation.
I agree with Counselor Terrell. I absolutely do not believe that there was open meeting violations that occurred. So in this particular matter, I would and I will vote that it did not happen. So it's not an issue. I do think there are some concerns raised that are very legitimate. I think the top two in my mind, as I'm hearing it, are I do think there is cause for, I think there's an argument for us to re-review Rule 19, which is the Code of Ethics.
Mhm.
If we would like to discuss, does that apply to this particular circumstance with Counselor Riley? That may have impact on this or not with regards especially to the public apology request. But I also think there is an argument to discuss for appointments, the process, as you mentioned. There obviously was something that went off the rails, for lack of a better way of putting it. But I do think it warrants a much deeper discussion in the future, because I'll just say really briefly right now, I am concerned about, while I don't think that we should just open the door to have any anonymous complaint or email or however we want to call it, I also think that, to your point, Counselor Kwasinski, there might be concerns that are quite legitimate where someone does not feel safe, and whatever that safety means, physical, emotional, whatever kind of safe that is, that doesn't necessarily cross the line into it's a police matter or a law abiding kind of matter, but is more maybe interpersonal or things, which it sounds like was what the nature of these emails were. Now, I think part of the issue is that we can't verify these emails, and that falls into open meeting law discussions. So it's complicated, but I do think, and I want to think and research a little bit more myself in the future, but I do think that we need to have avenues for multiple ways of getting information and not necessarily shut down or shut out other constituents who may have legitimate pieces of information to share. Because, to Mr. Poulin's point, these committees are influential. You're making decisions for the community. And while you may not see behavior or experience it, or maybe 99% of your community may not experience behavior, it just takes one person to have an adverse situation happening, which we would want to be able to take into consideration if we were discussing as part of the council or as part of the appointments committee. So I'm not saying that's the case, where I don't know what happened with this particular instance, so I won't comment on that with Mr. Poulin in particular, but I'm thinking for future appointments, what that would look like for us. So.
Since the matter had to do with appointments and appointment processes, I'm just thinking, I know in the past when I served on the appointments committee, we did not consider any anonymous allegations. Just was not part of the picture.
Mhm.
But that was a different appointments committee at a different time. Every appointments committee, there's no hard and fast written rule or policy of the council. And that leaves us to, do you want to leave it open? Do you want to tighten it up? That's a matter we should be discussing at a subject matter regarding that specific topic. I would leave that to the next, to be an agenda item in the future. In the meantime, I would like to see that Mr. Poulin's reputation, from what the information that has been made public, is protected. No one should feel that they are going to have their reputation ruined by being a member of our city committee board. How best can we protect that? Open to suggestions. Open to thoughts. I'm thinking the public apology request is an appropriate method of resolving this particular case. But we are not.
How would you like to go about that? That's the question,
There's a
I
couple of
think.
different ways. I
Should
mean,
we-
This committee could offer a public apology.
That's not what he's looking for.
I know,
And I was
I
gonna
know.
say, should we first vote on whether or not there was a meeting
But yes,
violation
let's be the,
before we go into the next
Right.
steps? Because I think that's the first step.
that's the agenda. item.
I see them all as the same agenda item and don't want to. I wouldn't mind, but I'm not sure we have the authority to further discuss the matter if we vote
Okay.
how we're going to proceed with this one.
If we take the vote.
That's the problem I'm facing, is that I think we need to decide what's our overall approach and then vote on how we proceed. You were thinking otherwise, and I'm happy to consider.
No,
other
I'm
ideas.
happy to continue to discuss, for now. I think my interpretation, or I should say, my thoughts right now are, I think the request for an apology is completely fair. I think because, to my knowledge, we do not have existing processes or procedures in place to handle specifically this type of citizen constituent counselor interaction. I think for this particular circumstance, what I think probably would make sense in my mind is we as a committee can let Council Riley know the discussion and the request that has been made. And I think it's up to Council Riley to decide if he wishes to make an apology or not.
Mhm.
If he wishes that he does not want to make an apology, I think that's his right and his
We
prerogative.
can't force him. to
And
do that.
Mr. Poulin has to accept that. It's unfortunate, but we can't always have things resolved in the way we want them to.
I agree.
Even if it is unfair or he's obviously, impacted quite a bit by this, and I appreciate that. I want to hold space for that. I think for our committee, what would behoove us to do is to then, in future meetings, really look into this type of interaction to see, does it make sense for us to put in place language and guidelines around how this kind of thing can be handled? Do we look at the code of ethics? Do we have to tighten up language or add anything in? I think there's room there, and especially with appointments committee, maybe reviewing what the process is there and thinking further about how information is shared and what it looks like, because I do think there's a little bit of language that the state provides with regards to anonymous information, but most of it seems to steer away from using it as far as a deliberation point. So that's my thought
Or be a
process right now.
decision maker, right?
Yeah.
I agree with you. I hear that you're saying it really is up to Councilor Riley.
Mhm.
We don't have any authority to order. We could to order him to do that. It's in his.
Oh, agreed.
I would take any suggestions as to how best we would proceed here. Do we want to ask for an extension of this matter from the Attorney General's office to respond? Do we want to?
I have no problem.
I'm thinking that we need to ask for an extension, because I would like to be clear with some attorney advice on this. I had requested that we get some legal advice on the matter. In fact, the other committees handle this with legal advice. I was put in the request to Counselor Derby, and it was his feeling that we didn't need legal advice on this.
I'm sorry, what's
It was
that?
his feeling that we didn't need legal advice on this. It's his prerogative as president of the council to allow access of any of the counselors who request legal advice. I would be willing to go back to him and with say that the committee was unanimous about requesting some legal advice on this. I'd like to be sure that we are moving in the right direction.
As far as what?
As far as this does not apply.
Personally, I feel very strongly that it's clear cut, and I don't believe we need the services of an attorney to.
Because isn't it up to us as a committee to interpret it and make a decision based on that?
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what attorneys Mr. Poulin consulted or what their takes were, but as someone who's also dabbled in the legal services and in my day job,
That's dangerous. Dabbling in
a lot
legal
of
services.
contracts for my business. I am not a lawyer, but I believe that it's very clear that this was not a meeting violation. So I feel confident in making that recommendation.
Making that recommendation.
But that's just me.
Yeah, no, I echo Councilor Jesik's thoughts on that. I don't think that this was, I don't.
And I agree with you, and I don't believe it was an open meeting law violation.
And even just hearing Mr. Poulin today, I think will accept that if that's what we decide. I think, again, what he wants is a public apology. He's looking for the appropriate channels with which to get this, which I think, if nothing else,
He knew this would get our attention
this would
and he would
bring it
get
up.
his quote unquote day in court.
Sure.
And that's why he went this route. I mean, I'm pretty confident in that. And like you said, he's just looking for an apology.
So, since we are unanimous in that, I would entertain a motion to proceed in whatever fashion you would like. Our deadline is to respond to the Attorney General by the 14th of February.
What is the nature of the response required? Is it an email or is it part of the form?
I think it's all of our first issue time with this response. Review and sign your complaint.
Instructions for public bodies. We must meet within 14 business days, which we are doing right now. We must respond to the complaint in writing. We must send the complainant a response and a description of any action we've taken to address the allegations. We must also send the Attorney General a copy of the complaint and a copy of the response. We may delegate this responsibility to an individual member of the public body, council, or staff member, but only after we have met. And we can request more time if needed.
So what would the motion be then? The motion would be that to submit that back to the state saying that we do not think that it was an open meeting law violation. Would that be the motion?
That would be the motion, right? And then we would ask that either myself, one of us, or the president of the council make that response. The question is, does the public body are we considered the public body, or is the public body the city council? And is that the public body that was noted for the violation? It's the city council, not the Rules and Government Relations Committee. And therefore, that's why I was asking about the extension, was to be able to get through
So we wouldn't vote on that
We
necessarily
could vote on making a recommendation to the full
to the full
council.
council,
To the
correct?
full council, which is generally our purview.
Correct.
The motion to send this to committee did not say for disposition.
Right.
So that's why I'm a little uncomfortable about.
Oh, so the
signing
motion-
something.
Agreed. Okay. I misunderstood then. So the motion would be to send this with,
To request an extension from the Attorney General to explain that we'll be bringing the matter to the full council on the 19th at our next regular meeting. At that point, we'll send it along. And that in the meantime, it's our recommendation that there's no violation of open meeting law.
is that in the form of a motion?
I can't make a motion.
Well, I mean,
Or
I do
I
think,
won't make a motion.
I do think it's about how are we interpreting what is a public body? Are we the public body, to your point, or is the public body the council? And it's written, as far as I'm reading here,
Public body is
ambiguously.
is the Easthampton City Council.
Because there is language around chair of the public body, which is, you.
In our typical processes too, like you said, referred to.
Referred to.
Yeah.
Unless it's offered to us for disposition.
Correct, which it was not, like
Which
you
it was
said,
not.
right?
Yeah.
So I would like to make a motion to send this to the full council to ask for an extension. Oh, hold on.
Yeah, so I don't believe the council can provide us the extension.
No.
The Attorney General
We asked,
provide us.
we asked for an extension to the Attorney General.
With the recommendation
With the recommendation that the council
did not violate open meeting law.
did not violate open meeting law. Section
29.05.
open meeting law 2905. Which refers to the complaint process, the process for filing complaints to the Attorney General.
The title of 2905 is simply complaints.
Complaint process.
Refers to complaint process. For filing an open meeting law violation, an open meeting law complaint. This is long. Okay. Anybody get that? Shall I paraphrase?
Can you please,
what I
yeah.
have here? Well, the process would be to recommend an extension to the Attorney General.
So the motion
Request an
is,
extension.
the motion is to
Request an extension for an extension. And with notation that the next time the public body meets is February 19. And it is this committee, it is the Rules and Government Relations Committee recommendation that the council did not violate OML section 2905 which refers to the complaint process for filing an open meeting law complaint. And not the process. Do we want to go further into it, and not the process for handling?
I don't think we have to get too in the weeds with that.
I think that may be getting too far.
Yes.
Yes. So I would entertain such a motion.
So moved.
So moved.
You don't want to read the whole thing out again?
I think we should. So let me see if we have that right. Is the recommendation of this committee to ask for an extension to the Attorney General so that we can meet for reasonable period of time, I should say, extension for 10 days. To get us through to the next 10 days.
We'll do 2 weeks just to make sure we don't want to attend these snafus.
14 days so that we can get through to this, and that send it to the full council, ask for an extension. That's what you said. Did not violate the open meeting law, section 2905, which refers to the complaint process for filing an open meeting law complaint.
So moved.
So moved. Second, do I hear a second?
Seconded.
Second. Any further discussion? Do you have the exact verbiage?
I hope so.
Okay, good. That being said, I'll ask for a vote.
Aye.
Sorry, what are we voting? We're voting on
We're
this.
voting on
motion.
the motion to ask for an extension and recommending to the full council that
Yes.
council respond with that there isn't an open meeting law violation according to section 2905, which refers to the complaint process for filing an open meeting law complaint.
Got it. Aye.
Got it. Aye, 3-0.
3-0.
Motion carries. Any further discussion?
Should we plan to schedule a meeting the week of the 24th in case we need to prepare any language or wrap this up after the council meets next week?
I'm hoping that we come with a response at that time. Yeah, I have no problems scheduling another meeting. Was there conflict with a proposed schedule of Councilor Derby's?
That's what I was thinking. I think the
was thinking.
26th is, we're gonna have a special meeting, I believe, that evening.
Oh, that's correct.
That's
Yeah.
so, I'm open other nights that week, depending upon anybody else's schedule. I mean, I could do Monday or Tuesday that week.
Or we could do earlier in the day.
I will be in California that week, so I'll be actually attending virtually on the 26th. But depending on timing, I'm probably able to attend virtually if needed. So
Do you want to suggest another time?
Oh, I'm more flexible, so whatever works for you guys, I'm really flexible with this, so.
well, we can also make a determination.
Make a
after
determination.
the meeting
Okay.
next
We don't
week
have to
too. So
necessarily.
It just can't be the 26th, unless it's earlier in the day.
Unless it's earlier in the day.
Right.
All right, very
Okay.
good. That being said, I'll take the motion to adjourn.
motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
This government meeting is brought to you by Eastworks and our local cable subscribers.